This is Chuck Edson, and at Kiva's Corner, and behind me is Kiva, I Ain't Mad at Nobody Sugarman, who is our mascot here, I guess, well known in our area for his motto from probably the 1920s or 30s, I ain't mad at nobody. He was about my grandfather's age, I guess, my grandparents' age, and from another generation, but those times were not that dissimilar from ours. Today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what's called moral foundations theory. It's something developed by Anthony Haight and some of his colleagues. He wrote quite a popular book back in 2012, and I actually read this one. It's the title is The Righteous Mind, or Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. That book basically explains how everybody is pretty much self-righteous all the time, and that is one of our basic problems, obviously. And as the title says, politics and religions divide us. And I'm an advocate, and I don't think this is partisan, but I'm an advocate for separating church and state. Let's divide it rather than us, I guess, is part of it. I think that religion and politics are both flammable. You put them together and you got something explosive. Reminding me again here of Guy Fawkes trying to blow up Parliament back in 1509, but we're not there. Anyway, trying to be also nonpartisan in this presentation. That's one of our points. And to help achieve that, morality is certainly a sensitive topic, one that we can disagree about, certainly, and I think it does underlie a lot of what we disagree about, our values, moral values. But this look is a scientific one that, like I talked about in the last episode, at how we can make things less personal, I believe, if we look at things in a historical perspective or a much broader philosophical one or in a scientific way. And this example is more about science and the research that Anthony Haight and his group has done on the question of moral foundations. Anyway, so Anthony Haight works as a scientist in what I learned to call operational definitions. My major was in psychology and research psychology. For example, Anthony Haight's, one of his moral values is fairness. And if you ask him, what do you mean by fairness, he wouldn't go off on some tangent about, philosophical stuff. He'd say, well, we created a survey that asked people, 65 questions, I'm making this up, and 10 of them relate to fairness. And if the person answered 8 of those 10 this way, then we said that's fairness. Those questions define fairness to us. So it defines what it is, what we're talking about. So I think one of our biggest problems too, I think everyone largely agrees with this, that we believe we know what other people think, and we tend to think in opposites. If I think this way, that other guy must be thinking of it in the opposite way. I don't think that's true. We really oversimplify other human beings. We're the most complicated entities in the universe. You can't. It's a mistake every time you stereotype somebody, pretty much. And we all, I think we all experience we're going to talk about 6 or 7 moral foundations. I think we all experience them pretty much into the same degrees. The most intense, liberals may be more focused on care or whatever, but conservatives care as much about care as liberals do, maybe not as often or maybe as many situations. We're all really the same about that. And when we start looking at these dimensions in a different perspective rather than our personal opinions about subject X, I think we could have more constructive conversations.
Show of hands, because we all have the same political stereotypes. We all know that it's Bill. And in this case, the stereotype corresponds to a reality. It really is a fact that liberals are much higher than conservatives on a major personality trait called openness to experience. People who are high on openness to experience just crave novelty, variety, diversity, new ideas, travel. People low on it like things that are familiar, that are safe and dependable. If you know about this trait, you can understand a lot of puzzles about human behavior. You can understand why artists are so different from accountants. You can actually predict what kinds of books they like to read, what kinds of places they like to travel to, and what kinds of food they like to eat. Once you understand this trait, you can understand why anybody would eat at Applebee's, but not anybody that you know. This trait also tells us a lot about politics. The main researcher of this trait, Robert McCrae, says that open individuals have an affinity for liberal, progressive, left-wing political views. They like a society which is open and changing. Whereas closed individuals prefer conservative, traditional, right-wing views. This trait also tells us a lot about the kinds of groups people join. So here's a description of a group I found on the web.
So let's get started with discussing what are the moral foundations. And Haight's been working on this, still is. I don't know when he started, but as I mentioned, his book came out in 2012. I'm sure he was working on it before then. But at the time I read the book, well, at the time he wrote the book, he had 5 moral foundations, and they were care versus harm, which is like the most fundamental one, and then fair versus cheat, or you can call justice. Third one was loyalty, particularly in-group loyalty versus betrayal. Then we have authority versus subversion, and purity versus degradation or disgust. And I think you can quickly see how these do relate to political matters for sure. Rather quickly, didn't take long, probably a year or so, Haight's been adding more and more people to his team, and I think pretty quickly he added a libertarian, and that person said, hey, you're missing liberty out of this, so they added liberty. So I want to have you look at a table or a chart or something here that's going to show how liberals and conservatives weigh these different values differently in terms of, some having higher priority than others. And when you compare progressives or liberals versus conservatives, there are, first of all, there are 2 areas where they're very close, and that is liberty and fairness. They're both pretty highly concerned about both of those and pretty much at the same level. What distinguishes the liberals is that they care more about care, and I think I've mentioned already, I think it's just a matter of circumstances, what questions they ask, and I think conservatives care about people as much as any liberal, but in different circumstances and different cases. But the real difference is on the last 3 of these 6, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. And in these, conservatives are all quite a lot higher than liberals. Later on, we're going to be talking about adding libertarians to this too, and it's all pretty interesting. I want to make a statement here about cost of living in my lifetime and what we can call the American dream. In my lifetime, I started college at Humboldt State College. It later became University of California at Humboldt. Now it's Cal Poly at Humboldt or something, but it's a good school, always has been. And in 1963, my tuition was $50 a semester or $100 a year for tuition. Then in 1971, wife and I bought our first house in northern Salem, Oregon, and it was a nice, modest but nice 3-bedroom home, nice one bath, 1,200 square feet or something, in a good suburban area, and that was $20,000. When you figure the inflation rates between the two, it was basically I was paying just over $1,000 a year for college tuition, and paid about the equivalent of $150,000 for the house in today's money. If you know anything about the cost of living today, it's probably very obvious that things were a lot more affordable in those times. I acknowledge that I had a much better shot at achieving some standard of the American dream. I've got no complaints, that's for sure. But the opportunities for success in the way it was understood in my time, getting a college degree, getting a career, and being able to stay in that career, and buying an affordable home and having a reasonable standard of living, no longer very possible in America today, and I believe that has a real effect on our national mood. I believe there's a lot less disagreement than we believe, but the conservatives tend to judge the progressives on the abortion issue pretty darn severely, that they don't care about fetuses or whatever, and are just to have no concern about that, and so they are essentially evil or whatever. And I'm sure no woman likes that choice, and it's got to be tough. So there are a lot of moral considerations that go into that one. Meanwhile, liberals, progressives, take a look at conservatives and say, they just don't care about people that are disadvantaged and minorities and stuff. They don't see them as legitimate. Meanwhile, they don't see me as legitimate because I haven't suffered enough, and I'm white, and I'm a male. How could I be disadvantaged? Well, I'm not complaining I'm disadvantaged. I got it made, but I think a lot of white people, there's a lot of reasons for a lot of white people to feel like they haven't been given a good deal in this society, and I've learned to consider that a lot more than I used to. I don't recall if Haidt talks about liberty much, but these I talk about that because most of these moral foundations have a biological basis. If we didn't care for one another, care for our kids, our chances of survival would have been a lot less. Again, fairness, if we didn't treat each other fairly, our survival rate would have certainly gone down. If we weren't loyal and following a leader, same thing. I doubt if our species would have made it. There are a lot of reasons that these moral differences that we focus so much on today have legitimate grounds. The matter of liberty, I think, is one that comes out of primates, certainly, and definitely with human beings. I can remember my adolescence, and tell you what, liberty becomes a pretty big factor for human beings when they become teenagers, don't they, Tiffany? Sorry. And I think other primates this happens in too. Probably not in pack animals like wolves and stuff, but independence people, those animals learn their place and kind of accept it. On the final moral foundation I want to say a little bit about is sanctity, or disgust, I call it. And I'm going to go back into history here for a little bit of a shift of subject, but German art and architecture and propaganda in the 1930s was something else. The architecture, I was in Germany back in 2017. The architecture is just blocks and strong and defiant and domineering. It's not very attractive, but you get the message that the state is in control. It was kind of interesting. And then we went into a museum of propaganda and art, and the art was all yellow, bright yellows and reds and blacks and whites, and domineering Aryan men and subjugated Jewish rats and vermin and stuff. It was all just blatant politics. It was, and promoting disgust in a pretty blatant and disgusting way. I've commented on this before and probably will again, but Robert Sapolsky, who is a neurologist out of Stanford, talks a lot about this, and he points out that disgust comes from, primates putting something disgusting in their mouths. So biologically, the barrier is our mouth, but since we become civilized, it's a lot broader than that. And I believe that when we got language, we started creating concepts like political concepts and behavioral concepts about privacy and sanctity and divinity and things, where all kinds of new nuances came into play about what we see as disgusting and what we see as glorious and divine and so forth. And it it involves food and hygiene and especially sexual stuff. And words like fundamentalist or woke or socialist or nationalism can just take on these powerful emotions in us. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little more about, I call it bringing moral foundations home, applying it to ourselves. Online, and the website link is available online. You can type it in and look it up, but there is a moral foundations test that Haidt and his group has completed, and I took the thing, and you start off, and it asks a bunch of questions, and they're obvious, and you're going along, and then pretty soon they start getting more and more challenging. You got to really stop and think and give some thought to how this would apply to you. But anyway, so you take the test, and then you can go online and see how the average American did. Well, I was kind of surprised. I kind of thought, I was pretty unique, but it turns out I'm pretty much just like the average American. And got the scores you get on this test, though, they're ranked from which is the highest moral value in terms of your relative scores for yourself, and which is the lowest. And like most everybody, the highest for me was care, like the average American, and the lowest was sanctity. Again, where I differ, not sanctity, loyalty, I guess it was. Sorry about that. I think loyalty was the lowest. I may have authority. Yeah, authority and subversion were the lowest. I put sanctity a little higher than the average person that you could see here. Anyway, the scores that you see on the graph here accurately represent what I'm trying to say, even though I've messed up some of this. Another way that we could bring this the moral foundations matter into our personal lives, and to consider other people too, and maybe give us a more open mind on this. Personality theory. My background is in psychology. The field of psychology, kind of late 1800s, started developing its own identity, and then Freud and others came around in the early 1900s, but it all pretty much started with, it makes sense, theories of personality. What makes us all different? And, about Freud and his early childhood things, and id, ego, superego, and sexual this and that. But there were all kinds of surveys made up, like the ones I referred to here for moral foundations, where people would answer questions on a sheet, and the clinician would talk to the person and come up with these analyses of their, analyze their dreams and whatever to come up with the analyses of their personality. But then it started getting more scientific, and mathematics and statistics got into it, and a lot of different survey questions were being made up to try to determine these, and a very complex statistical method came into play called factor analysis, And this is, you correlate questions and the answers, and you correlate the groups of, anyway, it's very, very complicated. And up until computers came around, it would take weeks for the statisticians to calculate all these things on their hand calculators. But now it can be done very quickly. And been lots and lots of research with a lot of different people. And they've come up with 5 major factors that they say that distinguish us from each other, which are valid and pretty reliable. And they call it the 5 factors ocean, where ocean is an acronym for the 5 factors. O is for openness to new experience versus, and these are also opposite, like people are either open or closed to new experiences. C stands for conscientious, and some people are more organized and proceed more deliberately than others, and I don't, but very poorly organized. They're extroverted and introverted, and that was a dimension of personality that's been very important since the beginning. Another one that we think about all the time is agreeableness, or not, and we know who those people are, and ways to measure that now. And then neuroticism, and basically in our society that means either depression or anxiety or anger, and we all enjoy those at different times, I guess. But so they took they compared Hayton's group compared those that came out high on their questionnaires to be either conservative or liberal, and they found some generalities. These are generalities, lots of exceptions. But as you might guess, liberals are more open to new experiences, such as new places and foods and stuff, and more open and appreciative of new cultures and stuff, and more trusting of other people. Conservatives tend to go the other way, and are less optimistic and not as trusting and want to check people out more. Liberals, as you might expect, are more inclined to go out and explore things and take risks. And, like I say, these are pretty rough and very general and lots of exceptions. And conservatives are more apt to not take risks, to be careful and check things out. In an earlier episode, I talked about how I think this limits our opportunities to take chances and learn from one another. But when you think about these 2 basic differences in human beings, it makes perfect sense. Sometimes, if you have a tribe made up of liberals and conservatives, you're in better shape because you got some people who are going to go out and check over the next ridge, and other people are going to be considering what it's like to stay here and the advantages, and you get everybody together and you can make an informed decision about how your society should go. If we're both stuck in our liberal and conservative little enclaves and arguing fine points with one another, we're not getting the big picture. We're better off to get the perspectives of those who really have different mindsets and different worldviews. Hell, getting mad at one another. Let's take advantage of the other guy's opinions and perspectives on things. And so what if a person doesn't quite care about certain disadvantaged people as much as you do? They care enough about a lot of people, so let's give people a break. So that's let's work together rather than sabotage the other side. If we could figure out a way to agree on a course, at least we won't be sabotaging each other like we are these days, and have our dysfunctional Congress is a consequence of a dysfunctional society that we are, and of course won't talk anymore about media and stuff dividing us apart, but not to our advantage, it's to theirs. Next, I want to go into a little deeper dive in this moral foundation things and look at libertarianism too, which is pretty interesting. I had to pay like $35 for an article from from a journal, a social psychology journal called Advances in Experimental Social Psychology. And it's a series of chapters, and the second chapter is Moral Foundations Theory, Hate, and he's got like 6 colleagues working on this one. And the subtitle is, get ready for this, The Pragmatic Validity of Moral Pluralism, which sounds a little intimidating, but really isn't. But those are fairly scholarly terms, so let's break them down a little bit. They're not that complicated. Pragmatic, well, we know what a theory is. It's sort of a bigger picture that sort of explains things, and we talked about how I believe Moral Foundations theory does that. But pragmatic means it's just practical. We can apply it to common situations to deal with common problems, and like finding moral differences between political groups. Validity means it's based on a solid argument, good evidence, fact, and reason. And pluralism has to do with it applies to a wide variety of cultures. And I mean, these measurements apply to not only different political parties in America, they apply to different cultures in different parts of the world. So in this article too, I want to add a little bit about how these theorists went about measuring these moral values. And I thought one of their best questions was, I had asked you, and I'm going to make up an extreme example here. How much money would it take for you to sell your child to slavery? I mean, questions like that put a money value on what it would take for somebody to, vote against the party they really favored, for example, stuff like that, and measured the person's intensity of belief in those certain values. They did other things. They assessed personalities, as I've already described, and found that there were pretty good correlations between personality traits and these moral values. And they went even deeper. They got people's life stories and analyzed them very objectively, and saw how their experiences related to these, formed foundations for their different moral values and stuff. So it all applies. It applies to everybody. So this is just adding to the conversation about the validity and reliability of this. Just another kind of theoretical view that our scientists gave to this overall question was, it's known that human beings, we don't come as blank slates entirely. We come kind of organized, prepared for certain things, and the most clear example is language. If we weren't born with an innate abilities and structures in our brains designed to deal with language, God, it would take us decades to learn languages. It's so complex. And when you hear the linguists and theorists talk about how complex it is to learn language, it baffles your mind. I wonder how I'm talking right now. Anyway, and so in the same way, Haidt in his group says, we're also born with kind of these fundamental structures or expectations in a biological sense to form opinions on these 6 or 7 or whatever the true number is of these moral foundations. I'd like to add a few comments that I've already addressed some of these moral values and put them into a little broader perspective. On the cheating and fairness one. They talk about how our species came about going beyond win-lose situations or non-zero game theories, where we can go about things where if we make concessions and come to certain agreements, both sides come out ahead, where both sides win. And I think that's what happens when you come up with a good compromise or a consensus. First of all, you all work together on it rather than defeat the other one's purposes. So you're definitely going to win-win in that situation. And then the loyalty, the sticking together, the cooperation, we all come out ahead. Loyalty, betrayal, though, we have these tribal markers just like primitive people did, except instead of having our hair, well, some people have hair and mohawks, but it doesn't, well, that's good. Now we have T-shirts and hats that say which team we're on. It may be a football team or it may be a political team, but insignias and flags, all kinds of symbols that we use that start from back when Stone Age, basically. I think I've mentioned here too a little bit about the language and emotions. Originally I thought I would talk about emotions and language in this episode, but I think it deserves its own separate episode. And there's some findings, some new theories about emotions that may surprise you. And I think this will also put things in a perspective that can help us understand one another. The paper, I want to go back to our paper I'm talking about, and the author's giving credit to other people in terms of their overall, getting started on this whole perspective. They named some other theorists and political scientists and philosophers and stuff, but I thought it was interesting that they noted a speech made by Pat Buchanan in 1992 at the Republican National Convention, and that is, I guess, Buchanan at that event was the first one to really clearly and in an obvious way talk about the culture wars, meaning about basically on these moral foundations of patriotism and conscientious work and military defense and family values. Again, these moral values get right to these political matters.
Like many of you, last month I watched that giant masquerade ball up at Madison Square Garden, where 20,000 liberals and radicals came dressed up as moderates and centrists in the greatest single exhibition of cross-dressing in American political history. A militant leader of the homosexual rights movement could rise at that same convention and say, Bill Clinton and Al Gore represent the most pro-lesbian and pro-gay ticket in history, and so they do.
Now I want to move on to looking at a chart here where we add, speaking of pluralism, we not only have liberals or progressives and conservatives, we add libertarians. And here you see another chart, and this one has 7 moral foundations, and they're arranged in a different order. And let me take a look at my example here. Yes, we have the care and the harm and the fair and the cheat and the loyal and betray and authority, subversion and the sanctity. And we also have liberty, but there are 2 versions of liberty in this one. And one is economic liberty and the other one is personal liberty. And I don't think I need to explain personal liberty. We all know what that is. We've all been adolescents and just told our parents what it is we thought we should be able to do, and they didn't. But and of course, we don't like anybody oppressing us when we believe that what we are doing is harming no one and is our best interest. And that's what America's about, in my opinion. But here we take another look, and this one includes libertarians. And this one surprises me. I don't know about you, but and I watched another video just a couple of days ago where Anthony Haight's talking to a group of people who have a museum of sexuality or something, so he knows they're kind of a little bit different, and he kind of assumes they're all libertarians, and maybe they are, but that kind of libertarianism and liberty we think about mostly as personal. do what we want to do as long as it's not harming anyone else. But there's another dimension that's a big one that we haven't talked about here, and that's economic liberty. And I think this means, in terms of the old division between socialism and capitalism, and freedom, liberty of a person to go out and use their own labor and their own skills to create something for profit, versus the state telling everybody how they're going to farm all together in a collective enterprise. I really believe that the world has pretty well settled this ridiculous economic thing, I hope. But, and I'm not quite sure what's going on in China and Russia these days, but maybe it's a mix of both, but mostly I think it's oligarchs. But I have no idea what to do about our economy, thank you, and so we'll skip that. But economic freedom is a big one for libertarians. And in this chart, you see, we notice a couple of things. Well, libertarians are the highest in both of the liberties, and they're the lowest in care. But they stand out. Conservatives stand out on those same three: the loyalty, authority, and sanctity. And libertarians are just basically like liberals on all three of those. So in my mind, it seems that, I'm not sure quite how to put this, but I think this loyalty and authority and sanctity dimension is sometimes apparent in liberals as well. Not many of them maybe, but I think out on some intellectual and ideological fringes, some of those guys are every bit as radical and intolerant as some of the others that we libertarians and liberals or whatever tend to focus on, and that is the nationalism and religion and righteousness that are the traditional values and practices of authoritarianism, which I believe as an American is my natural heritage to resist. So that's the point I pretty much want to end on, is that libertarians, I think we're all kind of like political orphans. Nobody has a political, hardly anybody. I know I don't have a political party where I feel at home, and I think libertarians are certainly in that group. And God, I'm starting to wonder, am I a libertarian? I got conservative values. It's all too confusing for me, and we don't need to stereotype one another, in my opinion. Before I close here, the purpose of discussing all these moral foundations, theories, and all this stuff from the abstract perspective is like I've been trying to say, is it so we can understand one another, that we're all from the same kind of common humanity, that we all have sort of the same design. We're all designed to learn language. We all derive all our meaning from words and language. We're all run by language and thoughts and cognitions. But fundamentally, emotionally, we are all fundamentally the same. We have different thresholds which set us off for either getting angry or frightened, and different ones for setting off other emotions for sympathy and empathy and care. But we are all the same. And when we take the trouble to look into how we differ, yet are the same, I think we can form relationships that we could never have imagined. So in closing up, I just want to mention, I'm not going to develop as my notes have here, I call those three, the loyalty, authority, and sanctity, the tyrannical three. Apologize for that, but and I think it's too, we can't stereotype many people as fitting that category, but there are some, and they are honestly on both sides of the spectrum at the extremes, in my opinion. But the point of this, is that I think there are a lot more individualists out here in our country than we know. I believe that we're more divided than we really are. I've been finding that when I talk to people of different perspectives, I'm quite surprised at how intolerant some liberals are and how open-minded and tolerant some conservatives are. But I think we need to give each other more of a chance to be heard and discuss things. And this leads into what is going to be our next episode, which is deliberative democracy. Deliberative democracy isn't so much designed to deal with the kinds of topics I'm talking about here. These introductory topics about what causes our problems and those are things I think we can talk about between different groups personally. But deliberative democracy is designed for more focused discussions, and this is what we want to get to in Klamath County, which is we find a public issue that is of common interest that may have different perspectives. We prepare some objective information on that support all sides as best possible on the issues, and discuss them in moderated ways, and to come up with some recommendations to go to Congress that the public can support and the government can support, and we the people could come up with the ideas and let government take credit for them and let them feel good about themselves, which is what they're supposed to do in this, what I'm talking about. So thank you for listening. I hope you were able to separate my points about this theoretical stuff about, more morality and how that ties into our politics, and how I think that stuff we can consider ourselves and discuss with people that we can talk about on a more intimate basis, and how this kind of an open-mindedness can help, and understanding can help us form more constructive and focused conversations that we want to have later. So thank you for your interest and patience in listening to me ramble on, and look us up on Kiva's Corner, and keep in touch. Thank you very much.